Welcome to The Unconventional Path, entrepreneurship and innovation stories and ideas. Hi, I'm Bela and Mike, coming to you from the Capital Region campus of Clarkson University in Schenectady, New York. I am a former three-time entrepreneur, venture capitalist, and now the David D. Ray Professor of Innovation and Entrepreneurship here at Clarkson University.
And coming to you from Münster, Germany, I'm Mike Wasserman, Professor of International Management at the Münster University of Applied Sciences. Thanks for joining us today. We hope you enjoy today's podcast. The two of us want to take the lessons we've learned over the last 3 decades as entrepreneurs, investors, managers, and professors, and leverage our network of really interesting friends, cool former students, business partners, and all these other people we've met along the way in our life's journey to bring you interesting stories, ideas, and insights into innovation, entrepreneurship, and the people that take unconventional paths to find happiness at work and in life.
Before we get to today's guest, a quick thank you to our sponsors, Clarkson University
and the Münster University of Applied Sciences. Now today, Bela, we're going to take a few extra minutes in the intro to really explain what this guest is talking about. She's definitely focused on the Capital Region campus, and I think we want to frame things up for listeners a little bit, so we're going to do things a little differently. Does that sound okay to you?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, Mike, because there's a whole list of great lessons here. And the immediate context is sort of upstate New York and that region, but I think it can be applied all around the world on sort of promoting and encouraging entrepreneurship. So on that line, Mike, she mentioned something called Carvel. I grew up in upstate New York, so I know what Carvel is. You grew up in the Midwest. Do you know what it is?
That's a story in and of itself. So yes, I'm a complete Michigander Midwest guy, Bela, but half my family on my mother's side is from Brooklyn and Dix Hills, Long Island. So as a kid, I used to come out and my cousins would say, "Oh, we're going to go get Carvel." And I'm like, "What is it?" And they're like, "Soft serve ice cream." I'm like, "I've had it a bunch of times." And they're like, No, this is Carvel. And they made a big deal about it. And we went to the Carvel store on Long Island. And sure enough, it was this amazing kind of better than Michigan soft serve ice cream. And then they had these cakes. And I think I remember my parents bringing a cooler the next summer and getting the cake and bringing it back and putting it in the freezer for, I think it was my little brother's birthday or something like that. So it was really that. And then my grandpa told me this amazing story about how Carvel was founded. I don't know if it's true or not. You can correct me on this. But my grandpa told me that Carvel and soft serve ice cream, that Mr. Carvel invented soft serve ice cream when his truck broke down and the ice cream was all melting and he was all pissed. But instead he said, "Wait, I'm just going to sell it, and I'm going to say it's this new soft serve ice cream." And he sold the ice cream right out of the truck, and it was so popular that that's like where he built his first store, and it took off. I don't know if that's fact or fiction. You know anything about this, Bela?
Well, that's the same story I've heard, Mike, that yes, indeed, he had an ice cream truck where he went around and sold ice cream out of the back of the truck, but it was the traditional hard ice cream. And one day the truck broke down, got a flat tire or something like that, and it was a hot day, and the ice cream was getting soft, and people actually liked the soft ice cream better. So being a good entrepreneur and recognizing an opportunity, he said, there's something going on here. I'm going to start this business selling soft ice cream. And he actually had to invent a machine that makes the soft ice cream. So I think he had the original patents on that. And the rest is history, as they say.
Cool
and
story.
Now that business has expanded throughout the United States.
Cool story. There's not one in Potsdam, New York yet, and they certainly don't have one here in Münster, Germany, but maybe that's next.
Hey, Mike, you have an opportunity. You can always open up a franchise there in Münster, Germany.
I got my hands full, man. You're keeping me on my toes with this podcast, Bela. You know that, don't
you? Didn't you always want to be in the soft serve business?
Love ice cream.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
I've always thought instead of having free coffee at work, we should have a soft serve ice cream machine.
Bela, I invented and I've been pitching this to a lot of my friends when they build houses. I'm like, you need beer on tap and you need soft serve on tap. I think you could put a system that could distribute soft serve throughout the house. Could you imagine, like, you're laying in bed, you want an ice cream, you turn the tap, and you make yourself a little cup of Twist, right?
Yeah,
Fantastic.
Brought to you by your friendly cardiologist.
Well, it keeps things moving in the carotid arteries. All right, let's focus.
Excellent. So there's a couple other things that came up that maybe folks who are not part of upstate New York community might want to know about. So what was one of those, Mike?
Well, Bela, tell me about this UNY 50 thing. Kate talks a lot about this and Upstate Venture Connect, and I think it'd be good before people start listening is to learn a little bit about this from your perspective.
Sure. So the best way to sort of take people through that story is first introducing a person by the name of Martin Babinak. So Martin Babinak grew up in a small little town in upstate New York called Little Falls.
It was literally
Right.
a little town called Little Falls?
Yes, a little town called Little Falls. I think Jimmy Stewart shot a movie there. Not that part I'm making up.
Okay.
But really, a nice little town along the Mohawk River. And he went out to the West Coast as an entrepreneur and started a successful business in IT, computer-related space. Did very well, had a nice exit, and decided that I think he's probably in his 50s, and he decided, you know what, I'm going to move back to my hometown, Little Falls, New York, and I want to try to take the infrastructure and support and the resources that exist in Silicon Valley and see if I can use those and put some of those together to sort of help a much more rural part of the country grow. And so Martin moved back and he started this organization called UNY 50, which is a collection of successful entrepreneurs from upstate New York. And yes, indeed, there are a bunch of them. And lots of times you don't realize the amount of successful businesses that exist. They may not be all the high flyers you read about in the Wall Street Journal, but there are people who have started 10, 20, 30, 50, $100 million a year businesses. And Martin was able to put together this group of those individuals, and they serve as mentors and guides to young, new folks who are starting companies. And so that's been a great success. So it's sort of a mentoring and networking organization that works very well. Related to that is Upstate Venture Connect, which also Martin was one of the founding members of. And this is an organization that puts together events that sort of talk about entrepreneurship. Some of them are educational. They do a big annual conference every year where they hand out some recognition to people who are up and coming and successful entrepreneurs. So it's really about sort of trying to replicate some of the infrastructure and networks that happen in successful parts of the entrepreneurship geography and replicate them in sort of upstate New York. It's been really important. It's been very successful. And Martin will be a guest on this podcast in the not too distant future. So that should be something you can all stay tuned for and hear the story much more direct.
Cool. And then Kate talked about Chloe Capital, and I've heard of this organization a little bit, but maybe it'll help to frame it up a little bit about what that's all about.
Yeah, so, there are clearly, in any industry, there are underserved markets and segments. And so Chloe Capital, of which Kate is a part of, is an organization, here again, first started, I think from the Boston area, if I remember correctly, by a successful entrepreneur who had an exit and a woman who recognized that women, both as investors and as entrepreneurs, are a really underserved, underrepresented market segment. And so they started Chloe Capital, raising money predominantly from women, but not exclusively so, to invest in woman entrepreneurs. And they do what I would call pre-seed capital. So really, really early stage stuff. Oftentimes, companies that are just have a blossoming idea, and they invest in these companies and mentor them and hopefully get them to the point where they can then have access to more traditional forms of capital. And so their success has been such that other parts of the country have heard about what they're doing and have invited them to tell their story in other sort of rural parts of the country. So that's when Kate talked about the road show. They've been hopping around the country to various cities and saying what they've done, how they've done it, and trying to propagate their mission in other parts of the country.
Cool. I think that'll help a lot to kind of frame things up a little bit. And so, listeners, if you're not familiar with the kind of upstate New York corridor, just bear with us on this. And the story really is amazing. And I think the model that she's built is something that anybody who's interested in entrepreneurship can really take parts of that with her, no matter where you live, no matter what type of environment you're trying to start a business in, or if you're an investor or just a friend of somebody, you want to be supportive of somebody trying to start a business.
Yeah, and we'll have links in the show notes to UNY50, Upstate Venture Connect, Chloe Capital. And for you soft ice cream lovers, we'll put a link in there to Carvel as well, and to see if you can find a store near you.
Excellent. All right.
So with that, let's get right into the interview, Mike.
Excellent. Thanks, Bela.
Hello, listeners. Today I'm here with Kate, and she's our guest for today's episode. Really interesting background, and she's really involved in a whole great variety of projects, which I think you'll all find interesting. So welcome, Kate.
Thanks for having me, Bela.
Sure. So, Kate, as a first question, if you were at a networking event and someone came up and introduced themselves to you, how would you introduce yourself to them?
Ooh, that is such a good question because, as many of us do, we wear a lot of different hats. And sometimes the foot that I lead with has to do with whom I'm speaking with and what type of networking event it is. But let's just say this is a universal networking event and we are now meeting each other for the first time and you don't know me. I would say that first and foremost, I am a community builder and I am a believer of people who want to make a difference, first and foremost. Mm-hmm. My titles, however, include being the COO of a nonprofit called Upstate Venture Connect. I do have a small marketing company called Peacock Media, and we're all about attracting attention for businesses. And most recently, pun intended, I've ventured into the venture capital world as a partner with Chloe Capital. And we are an early stage venture capital firm, not a fund, that invests in women-led technology companies.
Wow. That's a lot of different hats.
It's a lot.
And I'd like to sort of dive into those a little bit. But first, can we go back to sort of Kate Cartini as a 12-year-old?
Oh my gosh. You mean the tyrant, the brat, I don't know what other words my parents would use to describe me, except for I was a very dramatic child.
Okay.
I was a very enthusiastic child. I was always telling stories from the start, and perhaps they had a little bit of a dramatic flair to them. I don't know. But no, at 12 years old, I am the youngest of 3 older brothers. We've got a good age difference between us, 11, 8, and 7 years. I grew up in the Syracuse, New York area in a suburb called Fayetteville, Manlius. And it was a really nice upbringing because my father had an investment capital firm. And he and my mother both were in the franchise restaurant business. So growing up as a 12-year-old, I got to see behind the scenes of business and how business can affect a family dynamic. And doing everything from seeing scheduling to wiping tables to really seeing my mother in the customer service role of things. And then even behind the scenes more, seeing my father crunch those numbers. So So there wasn't any side of business that I didn't have access to at a very early stage. And then with my older brothers, there wasn't a shortage of competitiveness that we had in our family. And they really didn't take it light on me in terms of me being young or me being a girl. It was just me being a sibling.
Yes.
And regardless of what we were doing and what age I was or what I knew and what I didn't know, I needed to keep up or get out.
Yeah. So there's some sort of entrepreneurial activities in your family.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, clearly, we're a family of business owners. Through in and throughout, both sides of my family extends very deep. And then even most recently, my brother has carried on the tradition, and now he's the owner of our Carvel Ice Cream store in Syracuse, New York.
Really?
Oh, he loves it, and my mother loves it. My mother is 77 years old now, and she works for him, and she works every single day doing what she does best. She goes in there, she trains the Carvelettes, as we like to call them, and then she gets everybody ready for the day, and she's there to put on the smile and provide impeccable customer service, as she always has.
So I have two vices that I talk about publicly. One is chocolate. The other is soft ice cream.
Well, there we go.
Carvel.
Carvel.
Yes, well known.
Yeah,
to me, for sure.
Well known, and it came about because when we were kids, my parents had Orange Julius and Dairy Queen and caramel corn and TJ Cinnamon. So needless to say, I didn't have a very healthy diet growing up, but I certainly had a fun one.
Yeah.
And all the leftover caramel corns and things like that all came to the house. So when it was time for my mother to let those businesses go, my brother had then got into business with my father and the financial consultant side.
Wow.
And when he had an opportunity to pick up this Carvel, he started really working with both of my parents at that point. So I was a little bit jealous.
Yeah. Carvel ice cream cakes were my favorite ask for a birthday cake. And still to this day,
there we go.
My wife will attest to that. Cool. So then what came after high school?
So after high school, I went to Christian Brothers Academy, which was really interesting because for those who don't know, CBA started off as an all-male school.
Yes.
But when I went there, starting from 7th grade, we were one of the first classes of women led into the school. And actually, the margin between how many men in comparison to how many women were in my class wasn't that dramatic. There was an even amount, but I think it was just more about being part of a cultural shift at a very parochial school and having that kind of upbringing to be able to break ceilings in that. And we didn't even know we were doing it at the time. So after that, I ended up going to college, and I went to Syracuse University, and I went to the journalism school, the Syracuse Newhouse program.
Yes.
So I took my flair for telling stories, I guess, and I thought, why not try to make a career out of it as a journalist or shooting films or doing whatnot. And I really enjoyed myself, and my first job out of school professionally was in the newsroom.
Really?
Yeah.
Like broadcast?
Yeah,
or
broadcast news. I worked right for a local station in Syracuse, New York. I believe that was the NBC affiliate at the time. And man, I was the bottom of the barrel. I'm what you would call an assignment editor. Mm-hmm. And when I graduated from school, I've actually, I'm not old. I'm young in business, some people would say. But I've actually already gone through 2 recessions in my career. Mm-hmm. So my first recession was right out of college in 2001 with 9/11.
Yeah.
And here I was, bags packed, ready to go to New York City and work in the film industry or New York Stock Exchange or whatever. They've got that show prior to the bell ringing where you produce the show and you find out what the hot stocks are going to be of the day. I thought, well, great. I make my dad proud because I'm working in finance, but I can use my degree. I'm working in film. Well, obviously with 9/11, that didn't happen. So here I am in Syracuse, New York, unpacking my bags, figuring out, holy moly, what am I going to do now? Am I going to have to be a waitress or a bartender my whole life? Or all my friends are now in Silicon and Boston with jobs. What do I do? Well, I knocked on every news door and I said, let me in. And one of them let me in. One news director, Brendan Donnelly, let me in. I'll remember it to this day. And I started working in as an assignment editor, which is really a project manager for the newsroom.
Okay.
You find out where the story is, when the story is. You assign it to a reporter, the reporter to a photographer, the photographer to some equipment, and then they're off. And you're plugging information to them while they're sending you information back, and you're organizing it all and sharing it with producers who then write the show and anchors who then read the show. So they call it the heart of the newsroom, but there's a lot of complexity that goes along with it, and it's probably the most thankless job of the newsroom. But hey, you got to start somewhere. You got to get in there. So I got in, and I just started raising my hand, and if there was an undercover story with Jim Kenyon, the investigative reporter, then I'd go on that story, and I would do anything that it could take. And by the time my career, a couple of years later, matured enough, I got a call from someone in Charlotte, North Carolina, and they say, we want the firecracker from New York to come down to Charlotte. And I said, me? Okay, yeah, sure, I'll go to Charlotte.
Oh, wow.
And then I got to go to Charlotte, and much bigger market, bigger toys to play with, obviously. Now you don't have the live truck. You've got a helicopter if you need one,
Yes.
and all these other fantastic bells and whistles. But the moral of the story is working in the newsroom is an environment unlike any other, but it can probably be most paralleled with working in the startup environment, because you really do have minute by minute, if not second by second deadlines. And you can work on something all day long, but at the end of the day, and 5 o'clock hits, if there's some kind of water main break that's going to impact, traffic getting home, then your story that you've just, blood, sweat, and tears on that you really loved, it now goes to the wayside, and you're covering a water main break.
Yeah.
So you have to really learn to pivot and really, really learn to work as a nucleus, one brain, with each other constantly. And getting that now appetite for work and learning how to pace yourself and all of that, now combined with just a natural storytelling flair, I suppose you would say, here I am in the newsroom and as a journalist. But I got to tell you, at the end of the day, in local news, if it bleeds, it leads certainly was a common theme, because now I've hit the second recession of my career. And I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina, and people are really scaling down their expenses, and they're using local news as if they would cable television. And your cops and robbers is really important to morale, I suppose, but truly, if it led, it bled. And homicides and Bloods and the Crips court cases and all these types of things didn't so much interest me or fuel my passion for this career that I had now spent a decade on. But what was happening were business owners would come up to us and they would say, hey, how do I get on the news? And I would say, well, if you're a local business owner and you're on the local news, you probably have done something wrong and you're part of an investigative story, so you don't want that. Otherwise, here's our advertising department.
Sure.
You can purchase an ad. And they said, okay, well, how about you make a video for our website? And I said, websites were just kind of becoming popular now, and social media was just kind of becoming popular now. And I said, well, we could do that. So, just dipping the toe in, reached out to a photographer and an editor who were already kind of doing some of this work on the side. And our first little business was born, Media Zeus, in Charlotte, North Carolina. And we catered to small businesses. And I left the newsroom during the wake of all of what was happening. And I started getting involved in that, in real estate. I was a real estate developer, because in Charlotte, we were outside the bubble. So now this is like 2010, I want to say. And while the rest of the world has already experienced the recession, Charlotte didn't. But Charlotte was the second largest banking industry in the world, which no one realizes. But Bank of America, everybody was there.
Right.
So now, here I am, new little business, out on my own, no health benefits. I'm of age where I'm not on my parents anymore, and I've just left the comfort of the newsroom to make a go at this. I'm thinking, don't worry about it because I got these side hustles going on with real estate. I thought I'll make my money back in real estate. Yeah. And then it just imploded on us, and Charlotte got hit big time. Yeah. So I lost big on real estate. I mean, I really lost. But I was savvy about it too. And the people I was working with over at Media Zeus, they both had families, of which I did not. So it was a lot easier for me to pick up and dust off. And at the end of the day, I scraped together what I could to move to Boston, Massachusetts, to be part of the startup scene that was going on there, and see, what I could do with a little company at the time called HubSpot.
Oh, wow.
Right? So I wanted to see if I could take the video production company and do more than just videos. But I didn't necessarily know how. I knew that I had a background in storytelling and condensing large pieces of material or content into tiny pieces of content, which was great for social media, and I really got the knack of that. But what was inbound marketing? And how do I really become a digital marketer and use all of these new tools? Yes. Well, it was through HubSpot and understanding, which, by the way, HubSpot is a CRM and sales marketing platform that helps startups and small businesses and even enterprise now really create content and push it throughout a journey. So you're not just creating content to create content, you're creating content to produce a result, a return on the time, which is the investment that you're spending on creating the content. So I learned all about that, and now here I am in Boston really sinking into things and going, hanging out at the Cambridge Innovation Center, and Facebook is there, and hundreds of different startup companies, tech startup companies are there, and my eyes are just wide open, exploring all of these different opportunities, but also the potential that they could be my clients. Yeah. And HubSpot was wonderful in terms of the tools that they taught, and I started working on really great projects. One of them ended up being with Backupify. And Backupify might not ring any bells to anybody, but it was a technology company that was based in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And I'm now trying to be involved in the scene in Boston. And I'm going to what's called Venture Cafe, which is every Thursday night at the CIC. And you can go and meet the Belas of the scene, find out who the investors are and who the high growth companies are. Well, there I meet the founder of Backupify, Rob May. And he's growing this tech company, and I don't know, he's got maybe 30, 40 people that are working there, and I didn't have a particular skill set, but I knew inbound, and I knew that I knew people, and he knew he needed somebody in recruiting. So we tested out what my skill set would be working for Backupify and helping them attract the attention of engineers that they would need to build not only the product, but the portfolio enough where they could eventually become acquirable. And that was a really fun project to work on.
You did that as an independent contractor?
An independent contractor through my brand Peacock Media now at the time, so still. So now flash forward later, and some people might be connecting the dots. Backupify sold to Dado. Austin McCord from Dado, which is that now big company, and Austin graduated from RIT, and through a handshake with that dean, he has now given $50 million back to the school, and Dado is going to merge with Autotask, which I know you know a lot about Autotask, it being a local company. So isn't that weird how these dots have now connected themselves? But being part of HubSpot now, I was there before HubSpot went public. So as an advertising partner, I was involved or offered to get involved in the friends and family round. So this now is my first taste of higher risk investing.
Yes.
I always had a portfolio thanks to my father, and I understood the stock market relatively. And he had helped and assisted, and my brother did too along the way. But this was my opportunity for us to all extend outside our comfort zone and see what it would look like through HubSpot prior to an IPO. So as an advertising partner, they allowed you to purchase stock through a platform which was then called Loyal 3, which is now called Folio First, but it's called Loyal 3. And this was a platform that you could get in on deals prior to them going to public without having to pay a broker's fee. Right? So I wouldn't have to pay somebody like my dad now. Right. I'm going in and I'm getting these companies that way. So I bought as much HubSpot as I could, as much as they would let me.
Yes.
And then it went public on Loyal 3, and as you can imagine, the stock went through the roof, and my dad and I are, yay, and we're dancing. And then it starts going down, and he goes, okay, you ready? And I said, ready for what? He goes, we're going to dump. And I said, what's dump? What do you dump? We're not dumping anything. We just got into this HubSpot thing. This is my future, Dad. This is my future. We're not dumping anything. And he goes, no. I got you. We're going to dump this. So we waited for the stock price to go past a certain level. We let go of some of it. And then he took my 401k and he bought it back under the 401k. So this was a really great hands-on learning lesson for me, but most importantly, it opened my eyes to the potentials and the possibilities, and also maybe how I could work with my dad, with him still doing what he knows and loves how to do on the traditional investing side, but maybe what I could do on a startup or a private equity side of things. But now here I am in Boston. I don't know how to make a go of it. I'm doing really well with Peacock Media and HubSpot and my little projects. But what does the next step look like for me? I don't know. Well, unfortunately, around that same time as things were going so well, things weren't going so well. And while my dad was so involved in everything and the growth that I was doing secretly behind the scenes, his health was failing. And he was not doing very well, but he was very proud, and he didn't tell anybody, and he, didn't tell anybody. He kept it on his shoulders. So I'm in Boston, and he calls me, and we're having one of our sessions, and because he was everything, right? He's not just my dad. I mean, he was my financial consultant, my coach, my everything. So my best friend. So I'm talking to him, and he asks me, hey, could you come home? I want to go to this clinical trial in Cleveland. Let's just go explore it, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, right. I get home, come to find out there is a trial, but he is not even in it. He just needed me home. And that was his way of asking, and he's never asked for anything in his life, and it was a pleasure. And because of the journey, even though it seemed so rough at the time, being in the newsroom and continuing to build that career from the ground up, the gruntless job that it was, and getting to at least Charlotte, to then figuring out, I don't want to do this, and throwing the cards in the air to start my own business and lose my matching 401k and benefits, to then moving to Boston and starting all over again. It's like it had been such a tumultuous time, but he had always said to me, Bela, you got time. And I didn't understand and appreciate what he was saying to me in those words. But he meant that I had time to rebuild, and he necessarily did not.
Right.
So now he's sick, and I return home to the Syracuse, New York area to assess the situation, as we all do when our parents get to be at a certain age or level. And I decided to return home full time and be with him. And it was the best decision that I've ever made, and I wouldn't change it for the world. And the late nights that we stayed up watching Shark Tank and dreaming about what the next phase was going to be are the most precious moments ever. And while I'm doing all of this, literally, I'm telling you that I hadn't even moved my stuff yet. I meet two men that you know very well, Nasser Ali and Martin Babinick. And they are the co-founders of the nonprofit Upstate Venture Connect, of which I am the COO of. And UVC is a nonprofit that helps connect high-growth entrepreneurs to resources in which they need to succeed. And in doing so, a lot of the leaders that are involved in the board of UVC and what we call the UNY50 Leadership Network, of which you're a member, many of them, all of them, are serial entrepreneurs, investors, or very professional corporate entrepreneurs that have managed millions to billions in portfolios throughout their career. So I went from not knowing anything really about venture, but that I could do it and I liked it and I was interested in it and there was something there. But how do you go from A to B? And when I met Martin and Nasser, I was able to help them by utilizing my storytelling or story selling, whichever hat you like to look. But I was able to help UVC attract a little bit more attention about their mission, which is really to rebuild upstate New York through entrepreneurship.
Right.
And because you talk the talk. And we can truly grow upstate New York as long as we support the companies like P1 Industries and Cloud Checker and, Plows and Mows and Syracuse and GiveGab and Ithaca. These are companies that are producing products and services to a national or even international market, and they're living in upstate New York and hiring in upstate New York, and their expenses are relatively nothing in comparison, and they're getting brilliant talent from 100+ Clarkson universities out there that are graduating millions of college students each year. Right. So it just makes sense. We've got the resources. And all I did at UVC by wearing my marketing or my story selling hat is take the wonderful work and networks that Martin and Nasser had accumulated in a few years prior to me being there and just put them on a pedestal. I just started sharing the stories is all and helping them connect the dots. They had the Rolodex, they had the infrastructure, they certainly had the experience and the playbooks for starting the first angel funds, for starting the first accelerator, like the Central New York Seed Fund and the StartFest Venture Accelerator and all of these wonderful things. Well, so I helped with that, and what they helped me with is I'm proof in the pudding. I drank the UVC Kool-Aid, and now here I am, a product of how the network can help you be a success, is that you all became my mentors. I remember 2 years ago, Bela, before Chloe Capital was anything, it was a napkin. I said, tell me about Peak. How did you do this? What are the benefits to everything of like, hey, can I hop on a train easily enough and get to New York City? Or do I need to move to New York City to build this fund or firm? I mean, it was all of you who I tapped first and foremost that are part of the UVC UNY50 Leadership Network that led me to these next phases and allowed me to more explore and learn if investing was right for me. You allowed me to go out there and say, hey, I saw this company at a pitch event. They meet your financial or investment criteria. Would you have a look at them? Or what do I need to do to help this company prepare them for you to have a look? And throughout the past several years, I became that talent scout or liaison, if you will. And that's how I've really been gaining my chops, in the venture world. But also, Elisa Miller out, your partner over at UNY50, is part of UNY50. So I met Elisa, who is the founding manager of Chloe Capital. She's a UNY50 member. So she's the one that saw how I worked and I saw how she worked. And when she decided to start Chloe, she tapped me on the shoulder and she said, would you like to do this journey with me? She had no idea about my dad. She had no idea about this path that I was on. Yeah. The stars just aligned for us.
So it's a real test. As I listen to the story you're telling here, it's a real testament to sort of the value of networking and building these connections. And I know I've often said that, everything that has ever happened with me in my life is a result of someone knowing me or someone introducing me to somebody. I think, maybe I got one of my many jobs by answering a classified ad. Everything else came from, a network.
Absolutely.
So it's a real testament. So let's talk about Upstate Venture Connect for a second. So oftentimes folks think about developing new businesses, economic development, as sort of in the space of public. The state or the county or the city does that. Now, Upstate Venture Connect's a private enterprise.
Yes.
So as you guys look out onto that landscape, and I think, as many people have said, because the world has gotten flatter, access to customers is easier, particularly for certain types of products or services. Access to talent's easier. Access to a lot of things is easier these days than it was 20 years ago. What are some of the things that are still really difficult for a company in Ithaca, New York, or Syracuse, New York to do as compared to if they were in Boston or the Valley or Austin?
Yes. Thank you for asking this, because this is something that we talk about daily at UVC. This is the problem that we're trying to solve with the nonprofit. Well, as we enter into what we like to call UVC 3.0, right? The 1.0 was Martin and Nasser using their experience and saying, we need to create an ecosystem in Upstate. And then 2.0 is maybe me coming along saying, you've created this ecosystem, now let's connect the dots and make sure that Boston and Rochester knows what they're doing, and Ithaca knows what Watertown is doing, and so on and so forth. Well, now 3.0 is about assessing where the latest resources are and seeing what holes are left. And from what we can tell, and this is based on our annual CEO survey and report that we do, it's based off of interviewing people when they come to our yearly conference, Upstate Unleashed, which, side plug, will be at the Turning Stone Casino and Resort on September 20th. Or in doing these things, it's not early stage. Early stage or idea stage or aspiring entrepreneur, student entrepreneurial stage is covered by Upstate New York. Thank goodness, because the universities and the colleges, for one, have stepped up, like what Clarkson is doing, and many of the institutions in Upstate New York now, at least if they don't have a major, they've got a minor, or they have some kind of entrepreneurial club or center or organization, which when I was going to school, they did not have that. Entrepreneurship was almost like considered a scam. You know?
Well, when I went to school, the word was not even invented.
Wasn't
yet.
even invented, yeah. Yeah, and then when I was, it meant that you were a scam, you didn't have a job. You either said you were an entrepreneur or you were an author. Yes. And that just meant you didn't have a job. Right. But now, the universities have now all these wonderful programs. You've got early stage organizations like the incubators and the networks that are localized. Here in Capital Region alone, we've got Innovate 518, which is a collection of all of the incubators and co-working spaces, as well as a hotspot. So now you're possibly becoming eligible for tax credits and incentives that way. And then you even have early stage funders like Launch New York, which is like pre-seed stuff. This is idea stuff, okay? Yeah. And all the competitions. The New York State Business Plan competition for college students, for crying out loud. So these resources now do exist for early stage. And there's accelerators and business model canvas workshops and the whole nine of it. There's no shortage, okay? Now you get to, I suppose, that next level, which we like to call the high growth or the scale up level. Mm-hmm. These are the companies like, who would be a really good example? Like SpinCar in Syracuse, New York. SpinCar is actually two graduates. They went to my high school, Christian Brothers Academy, if you can believe it. They like to make fun of me because I'm obviously much older than they are. And as Devin said to me when he first met me, they had girls back then? But yeah, they did, Dev. Anyhow, SpinCar is a company that is in automation, automobile automation, right? They're taking 360 images of the interior of these vehicles, and it's a platform now that is being used by used and new car dealers so they can sell more cars online. And this company originally started in the Syracuse Student Sandbox, which was based out of the Tech Garden, of which Nasser Ali launched originally. And then they moved over to the Start Fast Venture Accelerator, which Nasser and Martin started. And now they have an anchor office in downtown Syracuse. 5-7 or so years later, they just had a huge liquidity event in which the investors received, original investors received huge return on their investment. They're growing in leaps and bounds in terms of how much they're hiring. And I don't know, they've got dozens of employees right now in Syracuse alone servicing national and international markets, like I mentioned. So these are the scale up companies that have at least $1 million and more revenue and or have raised $1 million and more in fundraising, and now can put those fundraising dollars to use to hire a lot more people and to build very quickly and go after the market in a more rapid way.
Right.
These are scale ups.
Yes.
Well, if you're in a scale up company and you look around in upstate New York, there might not necessarily be the mentor or the board of director readily available to you outside of you and my 50 leadership network. You know, that's what makes you all so very unique, is that you are truly the top of the top, you know, the best of the best. And not only the best of the best, but the individuals who have raised their hands to pay it forward.
Right.
A lot of people forget that component. Sure, there's plenty of other successful people out there that are not in UNY 50, but are they volunteering to help these founders take it to the next level? No, they're not. So UVC has identified that these high growth or scale up companies are the ones that most need our support right now. And we continue to build programs and services to cater to them. One of them being the Unleashed Conference, of which we put them on a pedestal and we ask these high growth founders to do CEO talks, 10-minute talks, but it allows them to approach an audience of over 400 people, tell everybody what they're working on. In the audience, you have people like you that are running these institutions that have kids that need jobs, and now you're sharing these job opportunities with your staff members and with your graduates now, or any of the other things. You're thinking of clients, you're thinking of other investors nationally in your network that might get involved. But we need to let everybody in Upstate know that these stories exist, and a great fun way to do it is by listening to them live at the Upstate Unleashed Conference.
So, you know, we have a lot of listeners around the world, and I know that many of them are in the TV industry. They call them second-tier markets.
Sure.
So not the major markets.
Right.
And so if there are people listening who are saying, okay, how can we help the region grow? How can we help entrepreneurship? How can we help companies start and grow? What's the top 2 or 3 words of advice that you would give to those folks?
Yeah.
To say, focus on these areas because these are the ones that are really important.
The only thing that I believe in my heart that anybody needs to focus on is to let their walls down. Right now, and even though the ecosystem has been built in upstate New York, a lot of it is now originating from economic development dollars. And with economic development dollars holding these initial strings, there are a lot of milestones and rules and regulations that each of these organizations now need to follow. And thus, what has ended up happening is our regions, and when I say regions, I mean Capital Region, Mohawk Valley, Southern Tier, Western New York, Finger Lakes. A lot of people differentiate between what is upstate. So that's how I classify upstate, these regions. And these regions are all unfortunately competing for relatively the same amount of money or the same pockets of money that are now coming out of these government grants. So you're seeing people that are competing against each other instead of working together.
Yes.
And we have been good for the most part about sharing playbooks, but I think that instead of us creating new tools and new databases and new everything, what can we do to streamline and become more centralized, where if a particular region does receive a bit of funding from the government, maybe we can all start talking with each region and see how we pool that together to create a centralized database of deal flow, a centralized database database of resources, because a headline is only as powerful as the headline. And if I want to approach Forbes about doing a story about upstate New York, I'm not going to say that Vital VO has just raised $1 million in funding from the New York Venture Fund, even though that's amazing and an amazing headline. And we're very proud of Colleen Costello for what she's done. What I want to be able to say is these 5 companies in upstate New York have raised $1 billion, you see?
Yeah.
And we can create those headlines together.
So one of the things that I've often thought about is this notion of, if you think about Silicon Valley, if you think about Austin, you think about Boston, excuse me, even Boston is the entrepreneurial center of that, is everything. It's east of Route 128.
Right.
West of 128, there's not much going on. Sorry, Springfield, I don't mean to offend you, but the hub is sort of east side of 128. And when we think about upstate New York, we often think about from Buffalo to Albany, which is like 400 miles. Mm-hmm. And so there's a huge, and that's not including Ithaca. So we think both east and west and north and south, right? Clarkson to Ithaca, or Potsdam to Ithaca.
Yeah.
And that's a huge geographic region to try to mobilize and come together.
Oh, sure.
And I'm thinking about, are there other examples where there are geographic regions that large that people have been successful? I think that we're very unique in our sort of desire to bring together such a large geographic region.
Yeah.
And because it's large, you're dealing with multiple government agencies.
I know it.
Various counties, various cities, etc.
Various schools.
It's very complicated.
I know
it. And you have this challenge with the parochialism,
Right.
We're competing. And this notion of working together is much easier when you're in one community.
I know it.
When you're spread across a dozen different communities over hundreds of square miles, it becomes much more of a challenge.
For
How do you guys
sure.
think about that within Upstate Venture Connect?
Yeah, I mean, that's the problem. That's the problem we constantly have to keep solving, or trying to keep solve. And sometimes year after year it changes based on the new resources we have available to commit to projects like that. I mean, again, we are a 501c3 nonprofit, so we rely on fundraising, we rely on sponsorships, and the amount of resources that we acquire each year allows us to build new initiatives or tools or work on different things. Something that's been extremely successful for us has been the UNY events calendar, and this is an events calendar that aggregates all of the entrepreneurial events that are happening from across the region. This is very important because, as we've discussed about several times in this conversation, it really at the end of the day doesn't come down to capital. It does, however, come down to relationships, or so I'll say relationship capital.
Right,
because one investor might be able to get you one deal, but one person with a deep network of connections could get you an investor, could get you a client, could get you an intern, could get you how many other different things. So instead of just chasing the dollars, you really should just be growing your personal connections. And that starts even before you've decided to be an entrepreneur.
Back to that network we were talking about.
Back into the network, that's right. So UVC is always... it has this challenge always on their mind, and the free tools that we've built on our website at uvc.org will address some of these connected tools. I've not yet found a community that is spread out so much as us, and other communities are actually looking at us as role models, which is scary in a way because we're building as we go and learning as we go, as every startup, but it's because we have been at least successful in connecting some of these resources where, let's say, for example, Clarkson works with the New York Biz Lab. That's a beautiful connection. Or Lemoyne College is working with fast tracking solutions to help us administer the 2018-19 CEO survey and report. We are making these connections and they are working. In UNY 50 alone, not only do you have all of the companies that each of you help, but you're helping each other. It is a true network. Think about Christine Tate. She is teaching over at RPI. She meets Timmy O, who is the founder of Vera Security Systems, right? The handgun lock that's taken the world
Right.
by storm. She ends up getting involved in that management team. The first thing that she did was reach out to her friends and colleagues in the UNY50 network and say, who do you know? And wasn't it you? Didn't you have a hand in
I may have.
doing something? Yeah, I think so too. But a lot of you, and I won't embarrass and put you on the spot, but a lot of you had a hand in connecting them to a lead investor, connecting them to a fantastic pilot client,
Yeah.
supply chain, just tremendous financial modeling advice, all of these different things from within the network.
So I think one of the great accomplishments of Upstate Venture Connect is this wonderful network of individuals that you guys have built. You just gave a great example of how it has worked and supported.
I do. I want to give my
mission.
favorite example of all, though.
Go.
Chloe Capital.
Yeah, so that's perfect, because that was my next question, was I wanted to sort of switch gears a little bit and talk about what you're doing at Chloe Capital and sort of that endeavor and where it's going and what you guys are doing.
Sure. So if you're just tuning in, Chloe Capital is an early stage venture capital firm that invests in women-led innovation companies. And I am a partner in Chloe Capital along with my two partners, Elisa Miller-Out and Erica O'Brien, both of whom are based in Ithaca, New York. Mm-hmm. And I met Erica and Elisa through Upstate Venture Connect, and particularly through the UNY50 Leadership Network, of which Elisa Miller-Out is a member. And when she had a small liquidity event with her technology company, Singlebrook Technology, of which Erica works with her at Singlebrook, and they've worked together for many, many years on different projects together, Elisa had tapped me on the shoulder to start this movement with her. Also involved in the movement, we have Nasser and Martin, who are our advisors.
Yeah.
Chuck Storman is another member of UNY50, and he is also an advisor on our tour.
So what are you guys trying to accomplish at Chloe Capital? What's sort of success for you guys?
Sure, and I'll give one more shout out to Jean Case, who is a new member of UNY50. She is the director of the Entrepreneurs Network in Rochester, and she not only is a member of our board of directors, she is also a triple-time investor in Chloe Capital and a sponsor on our national tour. So what we're trying to accomplish at Chloe Capital is we are trying to decrease the gender gap in entrepreneurship. Plain and simple.
Okay.
Because we realize that the studies are fair. They show that less than 5% of women-led technology companies receive venture capital funding, and 0.2% of African-American founders, women founders, receive venture capital funding. Okay? So that's a problem. That's a problem, and how do we solve that problem? Well, we could, as a one solution to that problem, create a venture capital firm that now funds women-led technology companies. And that's great. Yay, we did it. But in doing our customer discovery, because Chloe Capital is, in essence, a startup company too, we found out that a reason why women-led technology companies perhaps were not receiving funding was because they were pitching their ideas to venture capitalists or angel investors who identified as older white men. And it has nothing to do with the Me Too movement in regards to why they were not receiving this funding. As I become an investor myself, my eyes are open to the fact that it's risky. Yep. It's even riskier than investing in the stock market. And you got to go with what you know and what your network is going to sustain. So now, yes, here is a woman founder who is now pitching to a white male founder. A white male investor, and it's a breastfeeding baby massage pump, okay? They don't get it, and that's okay. A man shouldn't have to get it,
right.
But it's a big market. Women control trillions in spending, you know. Sure. It's also a huge problem, you know, breastfeeding babies in the office and going back to work and this and that. But these women aren't getting through because they're not identifying with the investors. So part B of the solution to decreasing the gender gap in entrepreneurship is that we needed new women investors at the table. Well, instead of just investing in women-led companies, we needed to have an educational component now to teach women on how to do this. And that's where we started. We started with an MVP, just like anybody else, a minimal viable product, which is an accelerator that we had in October 2017 when we launched. And we brought together amazing women mentors from angel investing and venture capital who'd volunteered their time from all over the world. I mean, we're talking Joanne Wilson from Gotham Gill in New York City, Fred Wilson's wife. She's made 100 investments alone in women-led technology companies. So these people volunteered. We paired them with women, some of whom had never made an investment before. And then they got to learn about what it is. What's a K1? How do you choose the right winners? How do you do due diligence? What does a term sheet look like? All the basics, we let them understand what it all meant. But it was hands-on learning, and we also brought in 5 vetted women-led technology companies. And at the end of the accelerator, together with these women, Chloe Capital made our first investment in a company called Mi Padrino. A women-led company. The founder is based out of Ann Arbor, Michigan. She is a mother of 5. And while she was in Ann Arbor, Michigan, raising to do this, she's an international businesswoman, already been successful in business, but this was her first scalable company. And she's out there raising, and she's speaking with these traditional male investors, and they're looking at her pregnant stomach, and they're saying, not a chance. I'm not going to risk in you, who's a white woman trying to build a platform for the Hispanic community.
Right.
And it doesn't make sense to me. Well, what we saw at Chloe Capital was the fact that this mom of 4 with 1 on the way is the CEO of her household. She's been ridiculously successful in terms of her being an international businesswoman. And now that baby bump in her belly had turned into an actual baby, because it's 3 months now during the due diligence process. She brings her baby to the accelerator along with her mother. The baby's breastfeeding, they're doing the whole thing during the accelerator. She didn't think she was going to win. It was such extreme competition. We announced the winner, and, we present that one, that big silly check, like, hey, you won. Kim Gamez from the back of the room comes up with the baby underneath the blanket, breastfeeding. The little feet are sticking out from underneath the baby. We take the picture with the big check and her breastfeeding the baby.
Yeah. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. So it's interesting, as you were talking there, you were talking about investing and sort of investing philosophies. And, you always do your due diligence, you do your pro formas, you do all that stuff that you can read about how to do in books.
Right.
But you said something that really triggered a thought in my mind, is that you really invest in what you feel.
Yeah.
That's so true.
It is so true.
Because there's this intangible thing. And you either connect with it, or you feel it, or you don't. And if you don't, it really doesn't matter what the financial pro forma says. All that other stuff doesn't matter.
That's right. It's true.
If you feel it, then all that other stuff matters. But if you don't feel it, game over.
That's why
I think this diversity across sort of who's listening is really important, because we all bring baggage. I know I got baggage. I got plenty of baggage and biases. And the great thing about the venture industry is that there's no real rule book. So,
not anymore, anyway.
Right. So this notion of having this diversity of life experience in the room is really important.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
So now you have us 3 founders. We've had success with Mi Padrino. People is the reason why we chose that investment, because, again, we've got this collaboration happening. It's an accelerator. We brought in, quote unquote, celebrity judges, right, to be on the due diligence team and to help us pick these companies and to train these investors. And we're in the judging room now, and one of our friends from Plum Alley said, hey, I know the founder of the XO Group. And the Knot. The Knot is an event planning platform for weddings. Okay? And she said, I could introduce her to the founder of this company, and she could really get some good mentorship.
Yes.
Well, Lisa and I look at each other and we say, the Knot is owned by the XO Group. which is a publicly traded company that owns the Knot, the Bump, the Nest, and dozens of other of these kind of event planning platforms. So we said, well, jeepers, if Kim Gamma, as the founder of Me Padrino, can connect with Carly Rooney of the Knot, sky is the limit in terms of what her network could do to help open doors for Kim and drive business for Kim. Well, it worked like a checkerboard. And when it came time for us to raise additional funding for Me Padrino, we had a partnership in place with the Astia Group, Astia Angels. For those who don't know, Astia Angels is a large international network of angel investors who only invest in women-led companies, okay? So through our co-investing or funding partnership on the accelerator with Astia, we brought in the EXO Group to be the lead investor. Astia Angels rounded out the rest of the round, and then we got to go back to our original investors using our preemptive rights to put in a little bit extra money in on Me Padrino. And in 7 months, an additional $2 million was raised in this process.
Well, that's great.
So it was all based on, at the end of the day, we knew Kim was a winner. Again, this is the mother of 5. She knows how to get it done. We knew she was tackling a huge underrepresented market and doing it quickly, because in the 3 months we did the due diligence, she went from 50,000 users to 100,000 users, okay? And then we knew we had the connections in our network.
Very good.
So that was our decision.
Yeah.
Well, word got out, Bela. And people were like, who's this Chloe Capital? You know, what are they doing now? And what's going on? And we utilized the relationships that we built at the first accelerator, and all of those women that we asked to volunteer and speak and judge and this and that. We said, do you want to be part of this movement? What more can we do together? And then community leaders like Jean Case from Rochester, who is the director of the Entrepreneurs Network, which is a government-backed organization through Monroe County, said, I want you to bring this movement to Rochester and Monroe County. What would it take? So Lisa and Erica and I never planned on doing a tour. We thought, well, as first-time VCs, we're going to do this once. We're going to show people we can do it, ourselves included, and then we're going to go out and raise an actual bigger fund.
Right.
And just like normal,
traditional VC,
yeah, what's normal? But yeah, and people just kept saying, please come to our city, please come to our city. So the tour was born. And the 5 cities that you see on our national tour are the ones that reached out first. And they became our city champions, and they've helped us not only connect with things like venues to hold the events, but sponsors and even investors. So we've been to Rochester, we've been to Boston, we just got back from Denver, and right now we're getting ready for Chicago.
Wow, that's great. So wonderful success there with Chloe Capital. We're getting up on 55 plus minutes, so I want to start wrapping this up. And we like to try to keep these to an hour in limits. So is there anything that I should have asked you that I didn't ask you?
Yeah, what's next?
Yeah.
What's next is that we're, of course, continuing the work that we're doing with Upstate Venture Connect. We've got a lot of fantastic things on the horizon. It's September 20th at the Turning Stone Casino Resort is when we're going to be holding the 2019 Unleashed Conference and Awards. Yes. And this is a big event for us. It's also a fundraising event, so it's your opportunity to do well by doing good as well. And there will be some amazing speakers there. Also, the Chloe Capital Tour is about to come to an end. We'll be in Chicago in April, but then we're coming home to upstate New York. And we're going to be in Binghamton on May 1st for our grand finale celebration, of which we will choose our last investment on the tour. One more women-led technology company will receive $100,000 investment, and it's part of the Southern Tier Startup Summit in collaboration with Binghamton University and the Southern Tier Kaufman Southern Tier Incubator. So there will be activities throughout the day, and then we will end with our pitch competition and reception. So we hope that all of you can make it.
Yeah, that's great. And I will put links to Upstate Venture Connect and Chloe Capital.
Thank you.
Okay, and just so give the website addresses anyway.
That is chloecapital.com, CAPITAL.com, ChloeCapital.com.
Wonderful. Kate, this has been fantastic. I think that one of the great values of this conversation and this episode is this notion of a model that others can draw upon for how to take large geographic areas that are fundamentally rural for the most part and move them up the ecosystem, if you will, and provide opportunities for successful entrepreneurship and businesses to grow, to start and grow and thrive. So thank you very much for being a guest. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Bela, and thank you for being such an amazing mentor these past several years.
Well, thank you. Hey, Mike, I think there was a lot of really good lessons there in what Kate described, and they can be applied to very many other parts of the country. So given that you've been in Germany now for a while, so are there some things there that you think maybe our friends in Germany could borrow and try to implement and use?
Absolutely. I mean, we have a pretty different startup scene here. Berlin has a startup scene that looks most like the U.S., but it still doesn't match the degree of support that there is in terms of local government, in terms of educational institutions, and it's growing, and it's I think it's on people's radar screens, but it's something that's still a nascent movement. On the other hand, I haven't seen a lot that's really designed for women entrepreneurs or, again, here in Germany, we've had this big immigration issue that some of you may have read about or heard about, and we've had over 1 million new Germans from the Middle East and North Africa and other places where there's been wars. How do we get that whole new group of people engaged in entrepreneurship? Because they bring a lot of energy in, but it's hard for them to get into the traditional world of work here. That's a very structured society. So I think there's some really neat things for some of my German buds here to think about in terms of these types of models. So I think it's really cool. But the ideas of social and relationship capital that Kate talked about, all that stuff, we are big here into networking, and we are big here into social capital. What do you think?
I think one of the big takeaways for me was this whole notion of social capital. I don't think we've talked about that much in previous podcasts, where if you really peel back the onion of the things that Kate mentioned and the things that people do, whether they be in upstate New York or whether they be in Silicon Valley, it really revolves around this notion of social capital, meaning the people the connections you can make, and sort of the coaching and value you can get from those. I've often said that I think I've had like 11 or 12 different jobs in my career after graduate school, starting at General Electric all the way through to being a professor now. And in my career, I've applied to a lot of different jobs via classified ads. And I think I only got like 1 or 2 interviews out of all those applying to a classified ad. But I got all of my jobs and all of those things because of some kind of connection, someone that could make an introduction for me. And that's sort of a very transactional example, but I think the same is true when it comes to building a business. I've built several successful businesses, and I always used to sort of cringe at going to some of these meetings and conferences, but the medical device business I built came from meeting 2 orthopedic surgeons at a conference. And so that's this whole notion of people you interact with and the real value of that. And I think, the UNY 50, Upstate Venture Connect, Chloe Capital and their roadshow, those are all concrete examples fundamentally of social interactions and social capital.
Yeah, find these things, people, in your hometown, in your area. Find these events, find these people, because, maybe a nice way to frame this, Bela, we like to talk about the unconventional path, and we like to talk about people who take these winding and interesting roads, and you don't stumble on those by yourself. Right? You've got people showing you the shortcuts and the side roads. You've got people who went in front of you saying, no, turn left here. Don't turn right. You've got people saying, hey, just around this corner, there's a really beautiful view, right? Or there's something there at the bottom of this hill, right? it's worth the trip. So I think that maybe that's a neat way to frame it, is this idea of social and relationship capital are the guide rails and the markers and the signposts and the roadmaps and the way you get from the place you're at now in your life to some other place that's cooler and different and more rewarding and leads you to greater happiness. It all comes from who you know. And you're not going to know any new people if you're sitting around watching TV all day, right? You really got to get out there and kind of meet people and put yourself out there. Even if you're like me and you have a little bit of social anxiety and don't like to get out there and I'm geeky and short and all these things, right? Go and meet people. People are interested in learning things about new people. People are willing to help you if you give them the opportunity to do that. So I think that's a neat takeaway from this, right? All these structures and all these cool organizations are important, but if you as a potential entrepreneur or somebody doesn't go out and take advantage of them, it's not worth it.
Yeah, I think I'd like to expand on two things you said there, Mike. One is that I've always been amazed by people's willingness to help other people. So if you go knock on someone's door, a successful entrepreneur, and you ask them, hey, can you help me figure out the best way to position my business or the best way for me to raise capital or those types of things, they are going to help you. If you go there and knock on their door and say, hey, can you invest $1 million in my business? Right away, their sort of alarms go off. But if you're asking them for help, the alarms don't go off and they're really willing to guide you and give you some advice. So that's, I think, lesson number one, and how you can turn these social interactions into something that is of value to you. Think about, hey, what are the things I'm struggling with in my business? What are the things that I need advice on? And engage with somebody, and then who knows where that'll lead. I think that's number one. The other thing I was thinking about is people may be sitting there going, hey, wait, Kate's not an entrepreneur. She hasn't built a business. And then I think this is a great example of entrepreneurship is much broader than just building a business, right? She's engaged in UNY50. She's part of that. She's part of this Upstate Venture Connect, Chloe Capital. So she is taking her energy and time and her skills, right? As a communications major, a former, producer at a TV station, and turning them into a business that is helping to create a stronger economy and helping other individuals grow businesses. So to me, that is every bit as much of an entrepreneur as someone who starts their own business, because she's starting these things from nothing. It's not like, hey, come join this big organization, right? She's starting these things from nothing and working with her co-founders, whether it be Martin Babinak or the folks at Chloe Capital, and moving the ball further down the court. And part of their product is these events and I'll call them services to help other entrepreneurs be successful.
Yeah, she's a builder. I agree 100%. And to not understand that is the entrepreneurship is all about building stuff, right? So I think it's a neat connection. So yeah, I thought this was great. I learned a ton. Interesting life story, but also really giving back and doing amazing things to the community and helping others. And, that's a nice way to frame it too, is I know you are actively engaged in giving back and helping others. And it is kind of nice. And you reap what you sow, right, in the world. And then the last thing that I'll put is, I've had all these people that have helped me in my life, but I've also made amazingly great friends who I love dearly and who I've shared great moments with and shared sad moments with and laughed and explored new parts of the world and shared great meals and all these things. And so, I think the core of networking, that seed of going and meeting people and asking people for help, can only be a good thing. You might get a few doors closed in your face at some point, but, you pick yourself up and move on. It's not a big deal. And you'll find that people say no to you less often than you think they will. That's
right. Very, very true.
All right, let's call it a wrap.
Yeah, I think that's good. And so let's call it a wrap and close this out.
All right, we're happy that all of you joined us in our podcasting adventure this week and our interview with Kate Cartini. We hope you found the last hour or so interesting and thought-provoking. And as always, I'll make my two small requests. One is if you have questions about what we've discussed, suggestions about topics or potential guests, please get in touch with us. Our email is bela.and.mike@gmail.com. And number two, if you like what we're doing, please hit subscribe on your podcast app if you haven't, or even consider investing a few minutes and consider writing a quick review for us on your favorite podcasting service. If you know others that might find this interesting, please share us with them.
Hey, so that's it this week from Schenectady, New York. Thanks for spending time with us. We look forward to having you join us for our next episode. See you next week, Mike.
Thanks, Bela. Have a great week. And I will say, this is what we say here. Tschüss. It sounds a little weird, but I'll say tschüss from Münster University of Applied Sciences in Münster, Germany. Bye-bye.
All right. So, hey, hang on. You gotta translate that. What does that word mean?
It just means bye. So every time you go to a store or anything like that, when you walk in, you say hello, and when you leave, you say tschüss. It's kind of like
So you don't say
see you
you don't
soon.
say auf Wiedersehen?
It's too long. Auf Wiedersehen. Formally, you might do that if you're talking to like a older person and you want to be respectful, and they say that. But the short tschüss is, and you have to kind of sing it, is much more common in the German-speaking world that I've found.
Excellent.
And it's
See you,
spelled
Mike.
really great. It's TSCHU with an umlaut, which is 2 dots, and I love this, and then an esset, which looks like a B, but it's actually 2 S's.
Wow.
Honest.
See you, Mike.
All right. Bye, Bela.
This podcast is produced for Mike and I by our friends at Busy Media of Schenectady, New York. They can be found at busymedia.co.